I think it's a guiding ideology for our family. The belief that to whom much is given, much is expected. The belief that if we want to change America, we have to be a significant and substantial part of the change that needs to happen.
Welcome to the SheSpeaks podcast, a podcast created to elevate women's voices across diverse backgrounds on topics impacting women. I'm your host, Aliza, founder and CEO of SheSpeaks. Each week, I have a conversation with a woman expert who shares her best how-to advice on a topic so we can learn how to better do that one thing from a woman who's been there and done that. Our hope is that these conversations help you feel more inspired to speak up and be heard in your own life and work. Now, on to the episode. Welcome back to the show. I hope you're all having a great week so far. I am so looking forward to having you hear my conversation today. During this interview, I laughed, I cried. I really just had a wonderful chat with Dr. Kaye Wise Whitehead. She is the Edward R. Murrow winning radio host of Today with Dr. Kaye. She's also professor of communications and African American studies at Loyola University. And what we talk about is her history. We start back from when she was a documentarian and was instrumental in creating one of the first documentaries about 9/11, the Twin Towers, A History. And we talked about what that time was like. But then we also talk about the work that she does today and how her work has evolved, and that she really has spent a life in service. And what does that mean to be in service of something? How do we figure out what our purpose is so that we can figure out what we want to be in service of? I really hope you enjoy this conversation. With that, here we go. Well, Dr. Kaye Wise Whitehead, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, I'm excited to talk with you, but I would love to start, if we can, if you could talk a little bit about your personal background and your journey that kind of brought you to where you are today.
Thank you so much. My personal path is kind of long and winding. And I always wonder when people ask me that question, how much background do they want me to go into? This is my fourth career, probably fifth if you look at where I am in radio. So it's a lot of different paths. So to kind of sketch it out very broadly, and starting with adulthood, not starting when I started in radio at the age of 13, but coming out into my first career, I was a television producer with MTV. And I moved from there into a PBS affiliate, Metro Television. At MTV, I used to produce Puff Daddy's House. I produced MTV Jams with Bill Bellamy, with Dallas, with Simon Rex. I was there when we built out the MTV studio. And we brought in Carson Daly. And I used to do the Matt Penfield suite. So I started there. And having done that work, I moved over to Metro Television. And I started working on documentaries. I had gone to film school at the New York Film Academy. And I had received the Spike Lee D.A. Pennebaker Emerging Black Filmmakers Award to put me through film school and to start my career. And so I started doing documentaries over at Metro Television and did a number of them. And then 9/11 happened. And so my largest project before I left was Twin Towers, A History, which still airs every 9/11 on PBS affiliates around the country. It's one of the largest selling documentaries about 9/11. But I started working on it 3 days after the towers came down because I wanted to be able to document just the pain I was feeling, the pain the city was experiencing. And so we were able to get Rockefeller on the documentary. We actually had people on the documentary who had actually helped to build the Twin Towers. And it was after that film that was nominated for a New York Emmy, and my husband said that we were going to move to Baltimore. He wanted to launch a feeding ministry for people who were temporarily experiencing homelessness. And I actually agreed with that vision of wanting to give your life in service of others. It was based upon, where we attended church, and my father, we're Christians, and the belief that we're being led. And so we moved the whole family down here. My husband, me, our two sons who were under the age of 3 at the time. And we started over in Baltimore City, and I became a middle school teacher.
Because that is, as you said, that is just the beginning part of your career. I want to be able to move forward, but I would love if you could talk a little bit about this notion of being in service that you mentioned before in terms of the move to Baltimore. for that exact purpose of being in service. What does that mean? Can you share what that means and why you think it's important?
I think it's a guiding ideology for our family. The belief that to whom much is given, much is expected. The belief that if we want to change America, we have to be a significant and substantial part of the change that needs to happen. The belief that the way that you grow and the way that you become better is you do it through service for others. Both my husband and I grew up in the church. I mean, I, as a pastor's kid, my whole life is about service. What do you do to serve other people? How do you go in and you wash the pews on Saturday so that folks will have a clean church on Sunday mornings? And we raised our sons in that way. I mean, my sons have very vivid memories. They're 20 and 22 now, but they have vivid memories of being, 4 and 5 years old, going out with their father to take food out to people, to sit down with people who are temporarily experiencing homelessness. My oldest son took that belief into college. He's now a Bonner Scholar, which that scholarship is based upon service learning. He works, down in a homeless shelter in Memphis, Tennessee. So we live our lives that way. And we try as much as possible to think about how the work we are doing in the moment will impact other people around us. Now, it stems into every part of the work that I do, because I do, DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion, justice work now. And even that is about doing more for others by still practicing radical self-care, but making sure that you are a part of the solution and not just helping to add to the problem.
Let's talk a little bit about the hashtag Black Mommy Activist. That is something that you have been posting and prolific in social media. Can you share what that is and the origin of it?
So I guess I as the hashtag Black Mommy Activist, which of course is my Twitter name, when I first realized that someone had chosen me to be their mother, when I first realized that I was pregnant with my oldest son. And it was a very hard moment for me, because I wanted to be the rich auntie flying in and not having any children. I really believed the world was already too hot, too fat, too crowded. Why replicate yourself? But someone chose me, and I started writing my son's letters. Immediately. The minute I realized that I was pregnant, I wrote him a letter. And in that letter, I'm like, I don't even know how I can mother you when I can't even mother myself. Like, how can I carve a path for you when I can't carve out a path for myself? How do I help you to find your voice when I haven't even claimed my own? And I continued to write him and his younger brother letters throughout their life. In fact, that became one of my books. My third book is called Letters to My Black Sons, Raising Boys in a Post-Racial America, which are all the letters that I started writing them from the moment I found out I was pregnant. I also decided that if I was going to raise children, then I wanted to have a little bit of Dr. King and a little bit of Malcolm X and a little bit of Dorothy Hyde. I want some Ella Baker in there. I want to have a little bit of the spirit of Nelson and Winnie Mandela. I'm like, you know what? I want to carve out a path for them. And I want to be this kind of, what in my mind is this Black mommy activist, like getting in front of them and protecting them when it's time to protect them, being that mother eagle in front of them to show them the path, to go back beside them when they get to a certain age, and then to get behind them when they figured out how to fly on their own. And so when Twitter came along, I was already saying I'm the Black mommy activist. That just became my moniker. And so I began to document in real time. And I think that's why people like what I do on Twitter, is that I document in real time what it means to be a Black mother, like going through Black Lives Matter, dealing with issues around race, bringing them up through sports. My youngest son is a fencer, so I'm, at my fencing meets with him, and I'm, sending out things and really being honest about the second half of my journey, which is now being an empty nester. And so what does it mean to be a Black mommy activist and your sons are at college and you're getting back in touch with yourself? So that's how it's become who I am. And it's really an essential part of, I guess, my identity and how I make my way through the world.
You were in 2019, you were named one of Essence Magazine's Woke 100, and some of the other honorees, Michelle Obama, Simone Biles, Gayle King. What did that moment mean to you?
So I did not know that I was being considered at all. I don't know how this process is done. I was actually in the airport going to give a keynote. And I've been giving keynotes since I was like 19 years old. In fact, I just gave this week, I gave my 570th keynote because I started counting my keynotes with my Nana when I first started, because she always had this thing. She said, when you hit 500 keynotes, we're going to dance. And when you hit 1,000, we're going to take a trip. And she did not survive to see me hit 500, which happened in 2019. I was on my way out of town to give a keynote, and I was passing through in BWI, and I saw the Essence magazine. I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." And I just kind of picked up a copy, because sometimes I'll pay, and usually I don't. I mean, it depends upon what the day is. But I had a long wait in the airport. I said, well, I'll get the Essence and see who's on, because I saw it said Woke 100 list. I was like, well, who's on the list? What are women doing? So I can kind of get some guidance and direction here. And I was flipping through and I saw myself, and I kind of screamed in the airport.
You had no idea it was coming?
And I had no idea it was coming. And so I went back and bought another copy of it, and I bought another copy. I think I was on my way to Atlanta. I bought like 4 or 5 copies. And I was like, okay, what's going on? I'm like, well, I'm in it. I'm actually in Essence. And so I did post about it and put like the cover and my page, and then looked at the other women. I'm like, well, I'm on the list in terms of, one of the 100 Black women advocating for change, looking to change America. And there are people on this, like a Simone Biles, like Lizzo, like Gayle King, like Nicole Hannah-Jones, the people whose work I look at and I think about, okay, so how can I get to that level? And that was a real sobering moment for me. One, of course, I was very excited, to be recognized, that someone looked out around the United States and that they added my name to the list. Don't know how they found me. I appreciate that. But second, I think sometimes as women, very generally, and Black women and women of color more specifically, sometimes we have this measuring stick of who we want to be and what we want to add up to, and we keep trying to reach it. And sometimes you don't know when you get there. You don't know what success, what it means to have this final moment. What does that actually look like? And so that was a sobering moment that did not mean for me to stop or to slow down, but it did mean for me to recognize that every moment takes you to the next, and you have to celebrate all the moments.
When you were talking about your Nana with the 500 keynotes, she didn't see you, you said get to the 500. But, I just thought to myself, I'm sorry, I'm like, I don't know why I'm tearing up about this, but maybe this is like her dancing with you, right? Because you were on your way, you said, to that 500th, right? To that keynote. And this is a way that, she was celebrating with you.
I like to think so. I like to think that we celebrated together, because I think about that a lot. I was on my way to Atlanta, and then I later came to DC. So I was in DC from the Atlanta trip. I was speaking at a school, and the teacher there had read my Facebook. I put a long Facebook post about, like, what does it mean to just, miss your Nana, and to have these like moments that you want to share, and what it meant to me to reach 500. 500, I mean, that's a major milestone when you talk about keynotes and talks. I mean, you figure I've been doing it since I was 19, and I am so far from 19 now. To make it to 500, it forced me to stop and give thanks. I'm like, well, I've had 500 opportunities to stand in front of people and give a keynote or talk about how I see the world. Like, that's pretty amazing. And so what the students did after, because the teacher saw it, she had the students come out. It was so beautiful at a school in DC. And they came out at the end of my keynote, and they brought flowers, and they had music on, and they were all dancing. And so one of the students said, since your Nana can't dance with you, we're going to dance with you. So it was just amazing.
Hi, everyone. We're taking a quick break to say that if you're enjoying this episode, you can subscribe wherever you're listening. We would also love for you to join the SheSpeaks community. It's free to join, and you'll get the chance to have first access to surveys, giveaways, sampling opportunities, and great content like this very podcast. All links are in the show notes. Now, back to the show. So let's, if we can, talk a little bit about, since maybe 2019, since you were named to that list, of women who are helping really implement change, or focusing on helping educate and implement change. Can you talk a little bit about how you think things have changed and where we're heading?
So in 2019, and after the list came out, thinking about what that meant for my own life, 2019 was the last time that things were normal in this country. That when we got to the end of 2019, we rolled into 2020, beginning with the horrible death of Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna, and then we started dealing with COVID-19, which I knew I had some inkling was coming because we have a third son. We had an exchange student live with us all through high school, and so that's kind of our third son, Jack from South Korea. And he called me in December of 2019 and said, Sister Kaye, something's happening. He went to middle school in China. He went to high school in America. He lives in America. He's like, but everyone's calling their children home. He's like, I've got to go home. I'm like, Jack, you're an adult. He's like, I know. My parents saying everybody's got to go home. And so they told us we have to drop what we're doing. We got to get back to South Korea, which was so unusual. It's like, something is happening. And so he was telling me what to get. He said, you need to get some hand sanitizer, mask. I was like, mask? And of course, in 2019, we were not a country that wore masks. I was like, get masks? He's like, yeah, I think you should start getting supplies. Like, I don't know what's happening. He said, but it is scaring me because everybody's calling their children back home. And for a grown man and his brother, who was a pilot, both of them headed back to South Korea. And that's what really made me nervous. So we were getting on the ground. So I went on the radio and started talking about, I said, there's something happening, this coronavirus, like something is out there and we need to start getting prepared. Every day I was talking about it. Now, if you go back and look at the New York Times, the day after Kobe and Gianna died, there's a front page article of the New York Times, and it's the article on Kobe and Gianna, which makes sense, right? Huge article. Below the fold, which is below the line, in a corner, there was an article about coronavirus in Wuhan, China. It was still on the front page, but nobody saw that. We were all kind of grieving about Kobe Bryant, right? And bringing, a girl's dad and all these things we were talking about. Every day on my radio show, I did a coronavirus minute. I was like, look, we need to get ready. We need to do this. And we started getting complaints at the station. I was like, tell Dr. Kaye, like, enough. Like, I don't know what she's talking about. Enough. But I asked my, I said, you need to give me some space. And it was like a COVID minute became a COVID 5 minutes, became a COVID 10 minutes, right? But there were people who then called my show by the time we got to March, April, when the country closed, and said, Dr. Kaye, I was so angry with you in January, but I did do what you said. I bought hand sanitizer. I bought masks. I got a whole bunch of canned goods. And I just want to say thank you. Because we made the commitment on my show to be on the air every single day, because we serve a predominantly Black audience. WEAA, which is at Morgan State University, we educate African Americans, and we always add anyone else who's listening. So I was on every day. So that was a big change. When Dr. Fauci gave his first interview about COVID-19 happening in the Black community, I was that interviewee. The first interview he gave was with me on my station, where we only talked about, this was got to be November of 2020, where we only talked about the impact of COVID in the Black community. So that was a big change. 2020 was also George Floyd. Like, you had that happening all in that weekend, when people started saying, look, something's happening. For that weekend to deal with Ahmaud Arbery being shot in Atlanta, Georgia, while he's out jogging. You had Christian Cooper, who was up in New York. He, of course, wasn't shot, but he was dealing with Amy Cooper, no relation, when he was out bird watching. And then you had this video of George Floyd. So all of this, and I'm writing in my biweekly column with the Afro, I'm like, what you have is Black Lives Matter meeting Black COVID stories. Like, both of these things are happening at the same time. And it was this work that led to the Murrow Award. It was the work I was doing, documenting every day, talking about the impact of COVID in the Black community. I approached my university, which is Loyola University, about launching an institute as a place to try to answer some of America's most pressing questions around race and social justice, and use peace as the lens through which to get to solutions. So in terms of how the world has changed, COVID-19, Black Lives Matter 2.0, the white lash to Black Lives Matter, the attack on African American studies, and the launch of my institute, and what has happened since then. So I've changed professionally, but the world has changed in ways in which nobody could have predicted.
Right. There certainly seems to be more conversation about what needs to change in companies, in communities. But I am curious to get your perspective on what you feel is going to be persistent change over time.
Well, one of the things I think is going to be a constant is that people are going to continue to ask questions about what change looks like. Because asking a question about change and being willing to implement the change are two different things, right? Because asking questions about change, that's an intellectual and a philosophical discussion. Being ready to implement the changes, which might require you to be uncomfortable. It might require you to give up some privilege. It might require you to begin to ask yourself the hard questions about your social values and your morals. That's very, very difficult to do. That the battle we are fighting now, it's not against policies, practices, laws, and procedures. And I say that with African American Studies battle being an outlier, right? Because that's a different kind of classroom battle that we have to fight. We're talking about changing the hearts and minds of people. And an intellectual, philosophical discussion does not change hearts and minds, right? Like you have to find a way to reach people where they are. Well, who has the time, energy, or resources to talk to every single individual about where they stand on race to get them to change? I'm not sure that's going to happen. I think that what may change people, and I am not a person that does this type of research, talking about the quickest way to get people to change, which is really fascinating, by the way. The quickest way to get racists to change their perspective on race is when they have a grandchild that's biracial. Because all of a sudden you're saying, wait a minute, the world's a horrible place, but I need my granddaughter, I need my grandson, I need my grandperson to be okay. So what do I have to do so I can make sure that this broad issue that's now a part of my life begins to shift and change, right? So it is really a lot of ways we can do this. It is trying to talk to people. It is trying to get resources into their hands. It is trying to set up places where we can have large workshops. I mean, I'm based at a PWI, a persistently white institution. I chose to be here to do the work right here with people that I believe need to be deeply engaged in trying to figure out A, where they stand on these issues, B, what do the issues mean to them, and C, how we can then be a part of the change that should happen.
I appreciate that you laid that out a little bit more clearly because I think it's helpful for people to understand what is required to actually implement the change. That maybe the step one is asking the question, as you said, but that's different than actually being ready and able to implement some change. You have so much going on. We've touched on some of the things that you do in your day, which is kind of unbelievable. You mentioned radical self-care, but do you have any tips for the women who are listening? How do you think about the self-care as a part of that, what helps you do the work that you do?
I started thinking while you were talking. So what does my day look like? Like when I talk about radical self-care, when does it happen? And where am I carving out space? I think you have to be intentional or you won't do it because we were socialized in a society and in a system where women, particularly mothers, are taught to believe that we are the last ones to the table, that everyone has to eat. And then we take whatever crumbs that are left. We take the plates that haven't been finished by our children and we finish those plates rather than making our own plate, right? Which is what I did. I mean, I'm not saying I did not do that. I mean, I learned like, wow, I am eating the leftovers and the scraps. And I am truly, just the mule here, as Zora Neale Hurston said, right? Just a mule, not just for my family, but for the work itself. So I cannot be the bridge that people walk over. So once I sent my sons off to college, it was trying to step back and say, okay, I have done so much for so long for so many. What is that priority for me? Who do I want to be at this moment? Now that I am for my senior 4 years into having a child in college, and in my sophomore. All right, so I am 2 years into this empty nester journal, which just I didn't count year one. We're still dealing with the after effects of COVID. Really, 1 year into this journey. So what I started doing is resetting my day, where I start with me, where my day starts with me making a conscious decision to take care of me. So I go to the gym 3 to 4 times a week, and I go there at 4:30 in the morning is when I start with my coach. So we work out every morning. It's a 2-hour workout from 4:30 to 6:30. I go at 4:30 because when I went at 5:30, people were already calling me. When I at 5, people were sending me text messages. Nobody's bothering me at 4:30. And when my coach and I started doing this and really working on this, it was, okay, we've got something going here. It's 2023 now. We started working on this back in 2021. But I prioritized my health and fitness, which is kind of the first thing I do. And then once I get that 2 hours out the way, then I hit the ground running. Because in addition to running my own institute, the Carson Institute, in addition to being a full professor here at Loyola, which just happened in January, I'm also the president of the National Women's Studies Association. And I have been for the last 2 years, which is the largest organization, the academic organization for women in the world. And so I've been the president. So, I put out statements on a regular basis, whether it's what's happening in Ukraine or what's happening with colleagues who are under fire. So I have to carve out space for that. I also write. I'm finishing up my latest manuscript, My Mother's Tomorrow, which is a collection of essays. I'm looking at doing that. So, and then of course I have my husband, I have my son. So it's a lot of pulling on me, but there are moments where I have to remind myself that when I'm gone, who is going to remember what I do? Like, who is it going to matter to? And for me, it matters with my husband and my son. So, am I doing the work right there where I'm showing up, fully present with them? And am I being fully present with myself? Everyone else will be taken care of. And some days I do really well with that. And some days I don't. Like some days I have to go back to something that my father did with me. My father dropped me off at college. I was the first grandchild, first niece, first nephew to go to college. So everybody rode it, right? 20-car caravan going an hour and a half from DC to take me to Lincoln University, Pennsylvania. And I was very emotional. And I remember my dad said, if you go in on your bed, I left you a gift on your bed. So when we drive away, you can open the gift. And there was negotiation back and forth. Can I open it? Can I open it? This before cell phones. He said, well, open the gift. And then, give me a call. Let's talk about it once you open it. Huge big box. And when I opened the big box, inside that big box was like a small alabaster box. And it was empty. And I remember calling my dad calling him collect, waiting for him to get home. I was like, hey, collect call. I'm like, Dad, you left me this empty box. Did you forget to put money, a check? Did you forget to put something in that box? And my dad told me something then that has resonated with me since I got dropped off to college years ago. He said, the box is not empty. He said, in that box is every prayer that we prayed to get you here, every tear that we shed along the way. The prayers of your grandparents are in that box. The prayers coming all the way through from our ancestors, because you are the hope and the dream. All of that's in that box. So if you ever feel that you are not going to make it, if you ever feel that you are not enough, go back to this box. Go back to what's stored in this box. And he says, you may not even understand it, but one day, like you're going to give your child this box and they're going to get it. So years later, when I dropped my first son off to college, he's all emotional. And I was like, you know what? Go in your room, on your bed, there's a box, and passing that forward. So that always grounds me.
What an amazing dad.
Oh, he's amazing. He is amazing.
Wow. Well, Dr. Kaye Wise Whitehead, if people want to follow you and understand more about the amazing work that you're doing, what is the best way for them to do that?
Find me on Twitter at Kaye Whitehead, Kaye Whitehead. And you can find, if you just type in Black Mommy Activist, you can find me on Instagram at Black Mommy Activist. And you can find me on Facebook. My show Today with Dr. K is live streamed on Facebook every day. And you can look for me online. If you just type in Kaye Whitehead, trust me, you'll find something I write. You'll find the Carson Institute's website. You will find me. Unfortunately, I'm not very hard to find.
I say fortunately for that. Thank you for spending this time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
If you'd like to learn more about our guests this week or how you can join the SheSpeaks community, check out the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening and looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you for listening. If you're an influencer or a brand that wants to work with us, please feel free to email us at info@shespeaks.com. Until next time.